to the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee meeting. It's Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. My name is Bob Doerr. I am the chair of the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. We have recommendation status updates, open and pending recommendations. Recommendation 343, we will review the response from DOE on that today. Recommendation 344, prescribed fires. We received back a response from DOE regarding that recommendation. We will review that recommendation today. Recommendation 346 is an open recommendation, drone spotting over SRS, that was submitted at the last full board meeting and approved by the full board. We're waiting a response from DOE on that. And then recommendation 347 was a recommendation that was approved at the last full board meeting. And at the creation facility, we are waiting a response from DOE on that. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to announce that the next committee meeting will be on October 18th, starting at 4:30 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. And it will be right here in the same location at the DOE Meeting Center, 230 Village Green Boulevard, Suite 220, in Aiken, South Carolina. Next slide, please. Or if there is one. Okay. Normally, before we get started on our discussion for today, we want to welcome everyone that's here, both in the public and the committee members that have chosen to come today. We'd also like to acknowledge anybody who's listening in to the meeting online. Is there anyone online today?
I'm on the phone. It's Deidre Lloyd,
Okay, Deidre, thank you. And normally we do go around and acknowledge everybody that's here and let them introduce themselves to the meeting.
Deidre Lloyd from EPA is also on.
Yes, we heard, right. Deidre Lloyd from EPA is here. And I'd like to start up at the top left and let everyone just acknowledge who they are, please.
I'm Pam Marks, DOE, DDFO.
Tom French, cab.
Nina Spinelli, cab.
David Hoyle, cab.
Earl Shepard, cab.
Mary Weber, cab.
Dan Kaminsky, cab.
Gil Allensworth, cab.
Bob Doerr, cab.
Dave Vovakes, cab.
Delisa Carrico, DOE.
Chelsea Gissing, cab support.
James Sander, cab support.
Okay. And then in our audience today, would you like to acknowledge who you are? And
Jack Craig, Department of Energy.
Zach Todd, Department of Energy.
Joe Rosalo, public. Dave Pound, public.
Oh, Tim Coughlin, SRS.
Avery Hammond, DOE. Sonny Lawrence, DOE. Kristen Weaver, SRS.
That's good.
Clay Miller, American Audiovisual.
thank you, Federica. Okay. So anyone, we'll have a public comment period in this meeting. And anyone from the public who would like to make comments, we ask that they come up, and we have a microphone up here so that what you are saying, everyone can hear, and it becomes a matter of record for this meeting. Please keep your side communications to a minimum. It can be picked up by the microphone. And I think that's enough of the housekeeping for today. What's on our agenda next is our point of contact status update that we receive from this committee each time we have a committee meeting. So that's going to be presented by Zachary Todd. Zach, would you like to come up and do that?
Thanks, Bob. As Bob mentioned, Zach Todd, Department of Energy. I am your point of contact. So for the budget, everything, I guess something that's near and dear to everyone's heart here. The House and Senate, they have completed their markups for the fiscal year 18 budget. There was a couple discrepancies between the House and the Senate's budget. Nuclear materials was one of the main ones. So they're moving to conference to kind of reconcile the differences. At the site, what we're doing is we're looking at the differences and we're analyzing the impacts of each, if either one of those go through. So we're kind of playing the what if game right now, and analyzing all those. Currently, we're preparing the fiscal year 19 narratives in preparation for the President's budget release after the new year, and those are due to OMB come September. Coincidentally, you guys have the strategic plan. We have a response letter that we sent to you, so I'm not going to discuss it here, but just wanted to briefly state that we're still in a holding pattern there. When an EM1 gets designated officially, I think we'll be able to start moving forward with the strategic plan and actually come up with a signed document. So with the military, training has kind of slowed down from the high of last year. It's just a significant downturn in the amount of training conducted in the last 2 quarters. Good news is there's still several initiatives in the works. The land lease and memorandum of agreement between South Carolina National Guard and Savannah River Site is still proceeding. We're optimistic that some of the engineering projects that we kind of spoke of at previous CAB meetings will be turned back on for this upcoming fiscal year. So we're starting to gain a little bit of traction with those projects. One other thing I wanted to discuss with y'all is the independent cost life cycle estimate. We kind of briefly touched on this. It's probably been a while since, probably about a year since I talked to this last, but in a nutshell, it kind of describes DOE's entire liability throughout the out years. So kind of looking at scope and how much money and stuff is going to be spent throughout. I thought it's something that the CAB might want to look at in the near future. Last year is the further. We had one of them approved for the first time in several years, and they're actually going through the auditing process of this throughout this year. So maybe something that you guys want to look at in the near future to kind of help put some of the, especially pension dollars, it's actually a piece of that. It shows all the money that's being spent throughout, I think, 2065. Of course, it's projection and it's estimate, but I think it'd be a useful tool for y'all. Any questions? Or do I ask for questions still? Okay, I do ask for questions. Sure.
What are you're working on 19, are you projecting it as a decrease or an increase?
So John said, actually I forgot to mention this. So John is actually going to be in Charleston next month, and he's going to be doing the updates, so you'll be able to get a lot more information than I'm going to give you. But he did say that I could say that it's encouraging for 19.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
So I imagine he'll elaborate a little bit more next month.
Can you at least, Dave Vovakes, can you at least mention anything about the guidance from OMB?
For as far as 19,
Yeah.
no, I think all that's.
Okay.
I
All
think we got to keep that
Okay.
close to our chest.
Okay, thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Bob.
Yep. Okay, next on our agenda is our committee discussion for this evening. And as I previously mentioned, we are going to review the DOE responses to Recommendation 343, the SRS Strategic Plan. We're going to review the DOE response to Recommendation 344 on prescribed fires. We have down here, we just had presentations at the last full board meeting for this committee about the Community Reuse Organization, CRO. And so if there's discussion items regarding the CRO, we will do that here today. And then we also had a presentation under our committee for recruitment and retention at the SRS. So we can take this time also to discuss what we feel about that presentation and if there's any potential for a recommendation from that. And then lastly, we have a draft recommendation. The recommendation manager is Gil Allensworth, and this recommendation is regarding the SRS pension budget line item. I know Gil was working on this for a number of months now. He's pulled together his facts. I read the recommendation myself. I find it very interesting. So we'll let's follow the committee discussion as it's listed here on the agenda. Let's start with the DOE response to 343, the SRS strategic plan. I will open up the discussion to anyone on the board, and then, of course, the public has an opportunity to input in this as well, if you feel interested enough to do that. Is there any discussion in regards to the response from DOE regarding recommendation 343? Okay. I'll just to keep the ball moving here, I reviewed the recommendation response myself. As I see it, the SRS is in agreement with both recommendations 1 and 2. They recognize, I'll just read the first sentence here, SRS updates its strategic plan to support and align with the Department of Energy strategic plan. So DOE accepts subpart 1. Is there any discussion in regards to that feedback? Okay. And then recommendation number... Okay, go ahead.
And David, maybe you can help on this. I believe SRS is supposed to update their strategic plan every 5 years, but their last update is frankly overdue, if the numbers are correct. So I presume that this update, once it is complete, would be then again updated 5 years from now, or whenever it's complete. Is that your understanding?
I think from what I understand that GIPRA and GIPRA modernization, and help me if I'm not accurate here, but I think the next update from DOE would have to be in February because there was a presidential election this year. So it has to follow the presidential election and be in place by February of the next year. And then, of course, I guess the SRS plan would conform to that after that's accepted.
Yeah, so just kind of elaborate on that. I mean, I think you nailed it. But SRS, we try to do it every 5 years. Just kind of that's our cycle. I don't know if it's a late or we're breaking a law. GIPRA and stuff applies to agency level. Savannah Riverside, not agency level. And then, but for the GIPRA or the GIPRA Act and stuff like that, it talks about the agencies updating their strategic plan every 5 years.
When was it last updated?
Our strategic plan?
Yeah.
It's been 5 years, but we're not at agency level. That's the key.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob Doerr, and really, number one, the response from DOE doesn't elaborate that the strategic plan will be updated by February of 2018. But that is basically what needs to happen. So I'm just presenting that as, something that's out there, but but basically the plan says that, or the response is that the strategic plan will be updated within the 5-year parameter. And Dave, again, you are the recommendation manager with that. Do you have any issue with that?
No.
Okay. Any other questions in regards to that, public or committee? Okay. And then on number 2, present a draft of that plan to the CAB so that the CAB can be given an opportunity to offer comments and provide input. DOE's response, accept subpart 2. SRS is committed to providing opportunity for stakeholder and community comments regarding the SRS strategic plan. We will provide a draft of the SRS strategic plan for comment and will carefully consider all input prior to publishing the document. Is there any comment from the committee or the public in regards to that response?
What's not clear to me in DOE's response to number 2 is whether they're simply providing the strategic plan to the CAB for comment or whether it'll be put out to the public in general for public comment. Is there anyone that can clarify that that's here tonight?
Jack Craig, Department of Energy. It will be both.
It will.
Yeah,
Okay.
we plan to have, we're not exactly sure yet, we'll be certainly provided to the CAB, the Community Reuse Organization, and we may even have a public meeting.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny Kaminsky, CAB. I'm just wondering if we have a proposed timeline for that, because February is a difficult month. January is usually training, if I'm not mistaken, or we don't have a meeting at all.
Whenever they can get us a timeline, I'll get it to you as quickly as possible.
Okay, but would we have it in advance of a meeting so that we could discuss it as a committee?
I don't think they know.
As soon as DOE hands it over to us to distribute, you'll have it in your inbox that same day.
So a lot of this is dependent on the department revising its strategic plan. So if the department revises the strategic plan by February of next year, which I have no role in, whether or not that schedule happens, we will give the public adequate time to review it. Like Zach said, we really don't have a specific schedule for our strategic plan. The department does, but the site doesn't. But we will give adequate time for public input into the plan.
All right, I have a question, Bob Doerr. So it sounds like to me the strategic plan would be issued in February, and then the public comment period and the CAB period would commence at that point. Is that fair to say, Jack?
I really can't answer that. What I was saying is the Department of Energy strategic plan may be issued in February. Our role after that we would make sure our plan is aligned with that. So it would be sometime after that if it was February. Whenever that is, assuming it happens in February, I would say it's going to be a few months after that for us to have an initial draft, and then we'll schedule a time with the CAB and the rest of the public for review.
Does anyone else have any questions in regards to the response from DOE on recommendation number 2? Public committee? Is there a motion to approve or disapprove this recommendation?
Yeah. I move that we forward this response by DOE to the full board to accept.
Is there any second to that motion? All right, it's been seconded. All those in favor on this committee? Show of hands. Yep. Okay, so we will move recommendation 343 forward to the full board with our recommendation that they accept this recommendation and the response from DOE. Thank you. Okay, recommendation 344. Prescribed fires. We have a response from DOE, and I will read it, read the recommendations, and then I'll maybe try to paraphrase what the response is from DOE. But anyway, CAB recommendation number 1, work with the Forest Service to create a notification system for individuals, businesses, schools, hospitals, media, local government of prescribed burn days that can be shared on social media and the SRS website to alert residents of potential smoke. And then it says here DOE accepts this subpart, and you've all had an opportunity to read that response. I'm not going to read it sentence by sentence here, but is there any committee or public discussion in regards to DOE's acknowledgement of recommendation number 1? And Nina, you were the recommendation manager on this, so if you have any questions, feel free. Anybody here? Okay.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'm kind of curious. It says the Forest Service will begin using WildCAD to notify communities of prescribed burns. Anyone know what WildCAD is?
So Wildcat it's a system that it's their dispatch service. So SEERSOC, you've heard of our SEERSOC that kind of controls the remote worker policy. The Forest Service has a computer system that just kind of tracks who's out, where they're out, that type of stuff. That's about all I got for it.
Well, I don't understand. They would use that system to notify the community?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on that.
Okay.
We'll get back with Tony Towns, the point of contact on this, and kind of try to get an elaboration on that answer.
From the response, I mean, it's apparent, they're looking to have people sign up on that Wildcat website so that they can be notified. So it'd be a voluntary sign up. If you want to be notified, you'll get notified. And
Yeah, I gather that much. I just was hoping somebody might have more elaboration on what the CAD system is.
Well, Bob Doerr Cab, I think that having a notification system certainly makes sense. I think that how that functionally works raises some questions for me too. In other words, I can accept the response, but it's like we need to know more about how it's actually going to work. And I think, is that fair to say for you too, Dave?
Yeah.
Municipality cap, is that something maybe we can add to the work plan or have a presentation on if we have some free time? Is the Wildcat, what it is, what it does, how people would sign up?
You want to pull up a presentation or just information, just a response to the question?
I guess it depends how detailed it would be, and if it's something that the public is encouraged to sign up with, it would be nice if we could have a presentation on it. Because I went to their website and I don't quite understand that.
Mary?
Mary Weber Cab, I think when this recommendation was first being discussed, I mentioned that I get text notifications from them, and it's very reliable. And there wasn't any elaborate process. I didn't have to do it online. I just spoke to people after a meeting and gave them my phone number, and I get a text whenever there's a burn in my proximity where the wind direction might be coming. And I get them at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and it works real well. So they may be expanding on that. I know they notify, the New Wellington Fire Department, or other people get texts too, depending on where they live in Barnwell, New Wellington. But they've been very cooperative about doing that.
Bob Doerr Cab again. I think that Nina's suggestion about a presentation, having it in the work plan, I'm not sure if we can do that for 2017, James Tanner, but
Off the top of my head, your work plan is pretty full for the remainder of the year, so if you want to take a look at what we could replace to put that in, if there's something you want to do like that, or if you're okay with waiting until 18, that would be the easiest one.
well, certainly we could wait till 2018. Next year's chairman could, with the assistance of DOE, could get that on the work plan agenda for 2018. I would be okay with that. Nina, I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I think that would be good if we can just check the work plan, see if there's space to add it, and if not, leave it up to the committee next year to figure out where it would fit in 2018.
Okay. Okay, is there any other discussion regarding recommendation number 1? Okay, recommendation number 2. Work with the Forest Service to distribute a calendar of prescribed burn days at local community events, including at the SRS CAB meetings. DOE does not accept this subpart due to the dynamics and weather dependency of prescribed fires. Any planned burn may be canceled or rescheduled. Therefore, it is not possible to provide an accurate calendar for specific burn days. Okay, are there any comments from the committee or the public in regards to DOE's response to that recommendation?
This is David Hoyle Cab. When I used to work for DOE and was involved with prescribed burns to some extent, I can attest to the veracity of DOE's statement here, they don't know one day to the next when they're going to have their burns because it's so dependent upon humidity and rain and whether it's suitable to start a prescribed fire. So having a calendar way in advance is just not possible, and I'm not surprised by the response.
Any other comments in regards to this recommendation? Okay. I for one, tend to agree with what Dave Hoyle just brought up. I think that it sounds good to have a calendar. The intention with this recommendation made sense, but I think when you see, again, what DOE's response is, that the weather and various issues that make it, if you set up a calendar and you publish the dates, but then you didn't do it, then what's the calendar really worth? So with that, are there any comments in regards to this recommendation? Okay, if there are no other comments, I'm going to make a motion, or I'm going to ask for a motion to either accept or deny this recommendation in total. Does anybody want to make a motion to?
David Hoyle, Cab. I recommend that the committee forward this response from DOE also to the full board for acceptance.
Second.
All right. The motion has been seconded. Any other comment? All right. All those in favor of accepting this recommendation, response from DOE, and moving it to the full board? All those in favor? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Next on our agenda are the two presentations that we received at the last committee meeting, or excuse me, full board meeting. I thought what we'd do next, though, is I'd like to get right into this draft recommendation that's been prepared by Gil Allensworth regarding the SRS pension budget line item. I've read the recommendation myself. I hope you all have. If anyone in the public is welcome to make comments in regards to this recommendation. Gil, you are the recommendation manager. I'm going to suggest you lead the conversation on this. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bob. I'll just go ahead and read it in, and we can go over questions. We can talk about the math and things like that as well. Background: as reported to the Savannah Riverside Citizens Advisory Board, the Savannah Riverside Environmental Management SRS-EM pension is severely underfunded. In reviewing the funding of the SRS-EM pension, 1989 stands out as a significant year. The Department of Energy informed the CAB, stating in 1989, when the DOE-SR contract transitioned from DuPont to Westinghouse, WSRC, the plan was overfunded, and continued. In 1989, the group annuity contract for the DuPont pension plan was liquidated and distributed as follows. $725 million transferred to DuPont formed the pension liabilities of the workers they retained. $246 million transferred to Westinghouse for pension liabilities of workers they retained. The remaining $386 million overfunding was used by the department for other mission priorities. If the $386 million that was removed from SRS-EM pension for, quote, other mission priorities, unquote, was left in the SRS-EM pension plan and conservatively invested in the United States 10-year Treasury bonds for the past 28 years, that money would have grown to nearly $1.4 billion today. In years 1998 through 2001, actual contributions made to the SRS-EM pension, pension were $0.00. There are other anomalies in the funding of the SRS-EM pension that warrant discussion. However, the CAB believes it has provided adequate background for this recommendation. If the $386 million was not removed from the SRS-EM pension plan in 1989, and if the SRS-EM pension plan was funded properly from 1998 through 2001, there is little doubt that there would not be a shortfall in the SRS-EM pension today. DOE has projected the SRS-EM pension as a percent of the annual budget as follows. Now, these are contributions to the pension as percent of forecasted of the total EM budget. So as the budget going forward, this is what the percentage is of what DOE is forecasting is going to cost. 2017, it's 5.8%, 18, 6.2, 19, 10.1, 2020, 12.3%, 2021, 12.1%, 2022, 16.1%, 2023, 15.9%, 2024, 15.5, 2025, 12.7, 26, 8.9, 27, 6.1, 28, 2.3. While these numbers are significant, they seem conservative from the numbers that have been shared in presentations with the CAB in prior board and committee meetings. The CAB's concern is that as more SRS employees retire and start drawing their rightfully earned retirement income from the SRS-EM pension, more annual SRS-EM budget dollars are going to be needed to fund the pension. As the current SRS-EM budget is constituted, pension payments and EM priorities/needs are competing for the same budget dollars. As pension costs increase, some very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. A debate over SRS-EM mission versus SRS-EM pension payments is easily forecasted. The lack of funding and the management of the SRS-EM pension should not be a reason to consider reducing SRS-EM pension member benefits. The lack of funding and management of the SRS-EM pension should not be a reason to consider reducing or underfunding EM priorities/needs. Recommendations. Savannah Riverside Citizens Advisory Board recommends to the Department of Energy that former SRS-EM employees currently receiving retirement income from the SRS-EM pension continue to receive 100% of their pension benefits and that a cut to current pensioners is never considered. 2, that employees currently working and are part of the SRS-EM pension program receive 100% of their pension benefits and that a cut to their pension is never considered. And 3, the DOE create a separate line item on the budget specifically for SRS-EM pension and removes potential competition/conflicts of SRS-EM pension versus SRS-EM priorities/needs. That's it. Tom.
Tom French, CAB. Gil, you've done a great job writing this up, but I think, and I was talking to you before the meeting, the real difficulty the department is faced with is many people in the CAB are very adamant about none of the nuclear material processing slow down at all.
Mm-hmm.
And if the pension is funded at 100%, it may impact mission delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would recommend that we add meeting fully the EM funding needs for mission and pension. I would make that recommendation. And the other thing I would recommend is perhaps having a working group to work with DOE, because this is a very complex issue. And where that money's going to come from is not clear. And I would like to hear DOE's plan of how they're going to move forward on this, because I know it's extremely difficult. I've talked to Jack many times about this, and it is not a clear-cut answer. And it's very important to everybody.
Totally agree. And if you want to reword the number 3 or add another recommendation, I'm completely cool with that. I don't see this as necessarily, one of the reasons I tried to write it this way, and I hope it came off this way, I don't try to make this adversarial toward current DOE. Basically, we're going back to 1989. I don't think Jack was in charge of the site in 1989. I don't think he was there when we made the decisions in the late 90s not to fund the pension. This is something we need to work together on. I agree with you. In reviewing these numbers and DOE, I applaud them for the information they gave me. I can't believe how much information they gave me when I asked some questions. They were very transparent. The numbers are overwhelming. Mission dollars are at risk here, and that's what you're hitting on.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing we sit back and it's easy to watch the news and you can see Detroit and you can see you can see Puerto Rico and you can see some other places that have had problems with money. EM missions it's going to become critical. What are we going to pay? I mean, I did percentages here. I mean, let's say that, let's just use round numbers. We get to $1 billion. So we get $1 billion. 160 million of that is going to go toward pension dollars. So I mean, so we were saying, oh well, that's $1 billion. I mean, I go to the city of Aiken, I hear people, oh well, you know, the site's got plenty of money. You know, they get $1.4 billion. You know, or you know, well, if you start taking out chunks at 16% like that, all of a sudden, I mean, $1 billion goes down to 840 million. That's a huge chop. Now, I wrote it in percentages just because, I mean, numbers are going to get just ridiculous. But that's what we're facing here, folks. I mean, yes, the pensioners, and I'm all for the retirees, and those retirees that are in the room, retirees that may be on the phone. I mean, you deserve your pension.
Yes, we do.
You deserve your pension, and I don't want to see that cut. But I'm more focused, really. I mean, we write about the pensioners, and it's easy to talk about that because it's easy to put faces to this, and it's very important. And there's people still working out there that are counting on their pension. But we're going to see some serious cuts. I mean, last week we were in a waste management committee meeting, and it finds out that Pam needs, you know, another, what is it, 80 to 150 million a year for the SDU? Yeah, Pam needs that to keep SDUs going. And here comes the pension saying, well, we need that money too. And so where's it going to come from? I'm talking too much. But that's where we're coming from. Bob?
So I just have one other comment, if I could. Your last line item have a separate line item for just the pension, separate B&R number. And I think that's a really good idea, but it has one really danger, and that is it's an identifiable target that if an administration wants to hit, they can hit it. It's really vulnerable. When it's buried in the DOE mission, it's not as visible. But if it's a line item,
still going to go on Sunday morning shows and still make noise. I'm sorry.
Well,
I guess
it does become very vulnerable. It's because it's so visible. I like the idea. I think it's the best concept, but
it is vulnerable. It makes it vulnerable. I can put my arms around that, but it also puts a spotlight on it.
Sure.
And you know, when in talking with DOE, talking with John Lopez, and you know, we've talked to him, we're the only site that has this problem. We're the only EM site that has this problem. No other EM site has this issue, only Savannah River. So it needs a spot. It's risk versus reward, and that's you know, a discussion that could be had.
We'll get to everyone's question. I wanted to address this issue specifically too with the budget line item. I know that you know, technically speaking, I mean the DOE budgets by PBS, and there are PBSs that involve, you know, the EM mission, you know, handling nuclear materials and dealing with nuclear waste. But there are PBSs that, like as an example, there's like administrative PBSs. There's a PBS that the CAB budget falls under, and it has nothing to do with nuclear waste or has nothing to do with security or that, you know. So maybe the recommendation could speak to, you know, is it possible to have a PBS? You see what I'm saying? A PBS, a pension PBS, rather than burying the pension cost across the entire mission of PBSs that are out there. That's really what you want, isn't that, Gil? Was that fair to say?
I'm not sure how to fix it. My desire is to and thank you, Tom, for bringing it out of me, is to put a spotlight on it. If it's another PBS, if it's something else, whatever they deem, it's a complicated thing here, y'all, and I'm not going to sit here and try to tell DOE how to fix it. I just want to draw a spotlight on it. That's what I want this recommendation to do. So that may be the way to go, Bob. I don't know.
Bobby, go ahead.
She was
Just signed in, I think.
Okay. Welcome to the meeting. Okay, I think Nina was next in line for comments.
Nina Cap. I just had a quick question, Gil, which is probably not a quick answer, but in the sentence "funded properly" from 1998, what is properly? Like, is there a federal regulation about how much money they're supposed to be putting away? Because
I'm assuming it's an assumption, and we all know what happens when you make assumptions. But I'm sure it's working out of what I do for a living. I'm gonna make a hypothesis here, an educated guess. I'm gonna say their actuarial tables were showing that they were still overfunded, and so they didn't put money in it. You had some really smart people running some actuarial tables who never thought 2007, 2008, 2009 were ever going to happen, and now we're paying the price. So I understand how the decision was made. Funding properly is just the wording I used. I find it appalling. 48 months, not a dime was put into the pension plan. 48 months. So yeah, it wasn't funded properly. Now I know somebody on Wall Street or Omaha or somewhere came up with an actuarial table and said, this is fine, we're overfunded, everything's going to be fine. And I'm not here to audit, I'm not here to beat up the managers. And that's those managers weren't DOE either. I'm sure they hired somebody. And we probably could go back and find out who they were, but again, we're not auditing. So maybe that's my own personal spin. I just think it's disgusting that it wasn't funded, and DOE certainly is not the only entity that had that problem.
yeah,
So
I was just more curious because I don't know how it is with our state pension, but I feel like the legislator.
the state pension is in bad shape too. But
So, but I feel like there's an agency.
yeah, don't talk about it. That's how we get here, Earl. Don't talk about it. That's how we get to this point. I'm sorry, Nina.
No, I was just curious. So, I know with our legislators, they meet. I want to make sure we're not picking anything extra. That they meet and they talk about this. Like, there's an oversight committee. Does the federal government have an oversight
I can't answer that
committee for
question.
that?
I don't know.
I guess what I'm really glad that you brought this out. And what I'm curious is, once this gets discussed further, are there penalties for not contributing? Like, is there a federal oversight committee that money is not my thing?
We're the Department of Labor. That's going. Department of Labor is completely redone in the ERISA rules. It's completely redone things in the last 2 years, but I'm not sure DOE it gets applied there. Jack.
So it's Jack Craig, DOE. I'll try to help a little bit, and this is a very complicated subject. So first I would say I don't really have any objections to the recommendations. I think it is something actually we have looked at, and as sort of a separate PBS we are looking at still, or whether or not that is something that helps the situation or not, we're not convinced yet, but we are looking at that. So for the background of this, I just want to make sure it's accurate, okay? So first of all, I'll go to the table. For us to project what our budget is going to be in 2020 or in the out years is a guess, right? So we have a pretty good idea of what the pension contributions need to be in the out years by dollar amount. But comparing that to a out year budget that we don't even know is accurate makes the whole table not accurate, really. So I don't know if there's a better way to display that, but unless you just say, if we assume from 2017 on, there's a flat number, a flat budget for an assumption for the table.
We need to know what the assumption.
If you make an assumption in the table that the budget's going to be flat from 2017 through the out years, and then compare the contributions to that flat budget, then you can come up with a percentage that's accurate. So that's just a comment about accuracy.
Yeah.
So I'll get back to on the very first sentence about underfunding severely underfunded plans. So there are laws with respect to pensions. This pension plan actually has a board of directors. They make decisions about how the pension is managed each year, how they invest the money, how much is required to go into it. There is an ERISA law that says you have to fund the plan to an 80% contribution for out year needs. So the board has to make sure that that funding, at least that they tell DOE what that amount is. If you go below the 80%, there is a penalty that you have to pay to do that. So when you say severely underfunded, it wasn't underfunded with respect to the ERISA law. It was funded to the 80%, but not to 100%. But the law doesn't require 100% funding. Now, if they would have funded it to the 100%, and some sites did that, they wouldn't have had the problem they have today, or we wouldn't have that problem. That was the decision made back then, and there were many years between 1989 and today, and even today we continue to fund it at 80%. That's the requirement. And there was, I don't know the whole reasons for that, but that's what the decision has been made for the last 40 years. So the comment about severely underfunding is really not accurate either. It was funded to the ERISA minimum amount. It wasn't funded to 100%. So the rest of this may be accurate, but there was a lot of other decisions that were made, as I understand it anyway, in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, where the department could have funded this plan to 100% over the requirement, but chose not to. And because the department has consistently, I believe, funded it at the 80%, the ERISA minimum, that's why you have this issue today. Now, this is a national issue. You hear the states going bankrupt. They can't fund their plans to the ERISA minimum. They operate on an annual budget, and that's why they have severe budget issues. This is a private pension issue. You're right, for the department, this is the biggest pension issue in the department. My understanding is with respect to NNSA, who runs a lot of large sites like Savannah River, they made a decision and have consistently implemented 100% funding for their plan. And that's why they don't have the issue today. So, once again, I don't have a problem with the recommendations, but I think the body of this, I just asked it to be factual. And whoever brought up the comment about having a working group, I think that would be beneficial before you maybe get to the, are we skinny down the background part to make it really factual? Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Just to let you know, the chart came directly from DOE. So that's
I don't know what the assumption is in it. So.
Yeah, and we do not. I could put that in there, then that would be fair. Yeah. We do not know what in DOE's words. We do not know what future budgets will be. The table below uses the 2017 DOE-SR EM budget with no increases through 2028.
That would be fine. Yeah.
So, can we add that?
If that's what that is, and you may have to change the percentages, right?
No, they're your percentages. I mean, this is all from you.
But is the funding from 17 on lap funding?
According to what this says, yes. I mean, what I'm reading. So what I have, Chelsea. So right above where we have, I mean, the chart, we do not know what future budgets will be, period. The table below uses the 2017 DOE-SR EM budget with no increases through 2028. And that's directly from, and that should have been included. Okay. Thank you. So that's where those numbers come from. And I guess the semantics, we can take the word severe. I mean, we can take that out. That's probably a little bit of my feeling about the ERISA laws. Because it's not a DOE issue, as you said. It's a national issue, and I'm not here to debate the law. So we can just make it underfunded. You can take severely out. Well, you can't. Jack doesn't. I mean, you don't even want to say underfunded, do you?
It was not funded to 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
It was funded to the minimum ERISA requirements, which.
Just put that in there. But
Yeah, just.
it is not a DOE unfunded liability. The DOE reimburses the contractors for the pension contributions
Okay.
at the levels that they're required. So, and with ERISA, there has to be a plan that you eliminate that deficit at some point and get back to 100%. So there must be some plan in place with contractors.
Well, and that's what, I mean, I think Jack was making that point to the board and everything, so, I mean, I understand that. But yeah, I can't, my eyes are horrible, so I can't read what we have written up there now.
Well, I have a question then, Bob Torcap. Is the increase in pension contributions going out into the 2019 through, say, 2025 years, is that reflective of just more people retiring or some kind of catch-up by DOE to have the pension geared up? Jack, could you answer that?
Jack Craig, DOE. So those numbers come to us from an actuary. They look at the total number of retirees. They looked at the projected number of people who could retire. They look at the number of retirees who pass away. So they have a calculation that they provide, they certify, they provide to the board. And so we only use what they provide to us and they certify to us. But you're right, it's just like a life insurance policy. It's a calculation they make based on the retiree pool. And so that's what we use.
So can I make one other comment? There's one thing that we're not really mentioning. That's why we thought a working group would be a good idea, because it's really complicated. And that is, when they make the payment, they calculate the payment, they calculate it based on some return on investment. And if you make that return on investment 7% and you're making 2%, which is what's been happening, okay, you run up a deficit. But the pension protection law allows you to amortize any deficit over 7 years. So you can just spread this thing out like peanut butter into the future. And that's why the numbers are really complicated to get at. What do they really have to pay and all those things. And that's why I think having anybody that was interested to get together and have somebody that came in and really told us how this works.
Since it is a private plan, it's going to fall, I mean, it's going to fall under the new DOL rules. So that, with it being a private plan, that changes things. DOL right now is still being litigated. There's still lawsuits pending from financial firms across the country on the Department of Labor fiduciary standards and what those be. And Jack alluded to there's penalties if you go below 80%. DOL deals with who pays those penalties. Do the pensioners pay the penalty? I mean, how's that taken care of?
Gil, can I just mention?
Please, Dave.
Dave Vovakes, CAB. There's a lot of information in the FY 2018 Congressional Justification, Volume 2. There's an entire section on pensions, and it lists the EM and all the obligations that they have for under this defined benefit pension plan. It is and one thing I wanted to make sure is that it was a defined benefit pension plan rather than a defined contribution plan. So,
yeah, it's defined benefit. That's a big deal.
So if you take your recommendation and you start it almost from the last sentence on the first page, when you talk about the projection of the chart, and then you keep the whole discussion on the back, which is you're concerned about the numbers, you don't want it to impact cleanup, and you keep your recommendations, I think that still gets to the point of making a recommendation without trying to deal with how we got there, right? You got a problem that's identified in the table. There's a discussion of the fact that it is a problem, and you don't want the dollars to impact mission.
That's the key.
The recommendations, I think, I don't argue with the recommendations. I think the last one, I think Tom brought it up. What we're looking at in the last recommendation is, does that make sense? So you could almost word it as the DOE create a separate line on it or some other mechanism to ensure that the pension requirements are met and not impact cleanup, something to that effect. But instead of saying right now we want to do a separate line item, I can't tell you today whether I'd agree with that or not. So for us to respond to that, we're still looking at that, but I don't know that that's the right answer. So if you want to make a recommendation, I would say that's an option for you.
David Hoyle, you've been waiting. You'd like to make your comments, please?
Gil, when you were drafting this thing, did you see if there's any other past CAB recommendations on this issue that we might be controverting with this one?
I did not.
It's usually, with something that goes back this far, I'd be very surprised if the CAB hasn't weighed in on it before, and I'd be kind of curious to know what their position was previously. And I'd like to, we've heard that DOE has funded the pension at the minimum ERISA level over all these years, and that's what's gotten them in the hole that they're in. Why don't we add a recommendation, number 4, that recommends that DOE from here on fund the pension at 100% of the ERISA level like all the other sites did and kept out of trouble?
I like the idea. What's that do to EM?
Well, we want to go.
Well, I'm not saying get rid of any of the other recommendations. I agree with those.
I don't. I mean, I want to be. I want to have my ears open, and I mean, I hear Jack say, we fund it to the level of the law.
No, they fund to the minimum level of the law.
That's the level
That's
of the law.
and they keep digging a hole deeper. I think that's crazy. They haven't learned their lesson.
I agree. But I'm not going to sit here and just point. I mean, me personally, this is how I feel. I'm just not going to sit here and point a finger at DOE that they made this mistake. I mean, it's made everywhere. This mistake has been made everywhere. We have to deal with it.
That's what I'm suggesting, that they deal with it in a more forthright manner, like the other sites did.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's a good idea this time, French. But if you go from 80% funding to 100% funding, and you look at the dollar value, so instead of in 2022, it's 323 million, it's probably like 600 million.
Right.
And where does that money come from? How does that flow into the site? Then the DOE has to go back to Congress, and Congress has to have some concern about retirees in South Carolina, right? To jump in and add that much more money. To get to 323, I think would be good. I'd like to go all the way and get 100%. I think that'd be excellent, but I think it's a big, steep hill.
That's kind of, Tom and I think on the same wavelength. Asking DOE to go to 100% would could possibly, I don't know what would happen, I can't say could possibly cripple EM's mission at the site.
Gil, is there a percentage that you would be comfortable recommending they go to that might bring in David's concern?
And great question. Great question. I can't answer that question intelligently. I mean, I could say 87% and pull it out of the air, but I don't know what that means. I can't answer that question intelligently.
I think that's why a working group would be really good and get the SRS people and the DOE people with us and let us understand the details, because it's a very complicated problem and it has to be solved. And there's no question.
It has to be.
I think everybody's in violent agreement. It has to be solved. We just need to understand better what's the right way to get it solved.
Bob Doerr, Tom, you're making a lot of sense. That you've mentioned the work group a number of times. I know with some recommendations, what we've done in the past is, I'm not sure DOE always liked that, but we'd ask for a presentation. In other words, we need more, is it fair to say we need more information to understand everyone here? Well, maybe not you, Gil, but I'm
No, I'm talking about because from Jack. I mean, Jack is telling you they don't know what that's really about.
No, but just the kind of the mechanism about, the fact that like the pension contributions are made to the minimum ERISA requirements. I mean, there's no misappropriation of funds, or there's no, things are being done in a fiduciary manner, but if more funding had been made at key points years ago, then there wouldn't be this catch-up that needs to happen now. I mean, that's a fact. But if, again, Tom has mentioned the work group, and I'm just trying to think logistically, we don't usually have separate ad hoc committees within the CAB. Nina, I know you're the chairman. I don't know if you have any thought about that.
Usually, but our SOP does provide for it.
We do, and I was just thinking about that. You know, we do have the option of doing an ad hoc committee, but I think I would leave this to Gil, and just, you know, the purpose of the recommendation is the recommendation to get the spotlight on there, and as the CAB, make a recommendation about this. When we move into something like a work group, I want to make sure that we're focused on what our CAB mission is and what we're chartered to do. And I don't know if a work group dealing with the pension would be something that we would be a good use of the CAB's time, or if we should start with looking at this recommendation, moving forward with this recommendation, and then based on that, maybe starting to look at something additional.
Let's work from and I know that we got more questions, but when we talk about this, and I'm not opposed to a work group, but let's work at it from backward. Let's work at it backwards. What would be the best possible outcome of the work group? And I mean that in a positive way. So what would be our end result of the work group?
I think with the work group, if you had the right people together that understand, you can understand the assumptions that they're using moving forward, and how do you maintain a fully funded pension and not impact the mission. And that's a very delicate balance. You're going to have some other people consult with us, I think, to do that. That would be my idea moving out.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to know. I'm sorry. These guys will wait.
Thank you. Dan Kaminsky, CAB. A couple points. First off, recommendation number 3 does make it clearly transparent. I like the opportunity to do that. And also, someone had pointed out that what level of funding, 80% minimum of the law is obviously not cutting it. So I don't know what their consultants are doing for actuary tables or anything like that. But I would word in there that we would recommend 100% without EM impact, EM mission impact. So obviously we're just more or less asking for more money.
Right.
Looking back at what the CAB may have recommended in the past is good for a historian's sake. The only thing is it's sort of a moot point because whatever they did wasn't either effective or taken to heart by DOE. If they did make a recommendation, obviously it failed because we're still here. The other problem I have with it, realizing that this is a government-funded private pension,
I know.
it gets real snaky, and you're going to lose a lot of public support from that view. I never want to take pension dollars from anyone. I have no idea how lucrative the pension is or is not the way it's written. I have no clue. However, I've been in the private sector my whole life, and I've already had 3 pensions that were completely dissolved over time, whether you wanted them to or not. And that's just the fact of life in the private sector. We don't have a never-ending stream of income from the U.S. taxpayer to fund it year after year after year. They have to cut the line and say, well, here's what you got, here's your buyout, invest it wisely, good luck. So, you know, I say that point because the only thing that I really disagree with was the 2 words never in there. You can never speak in absolutes.
There's a reason for that.
I'm just kidding. But that being said, not that I get the sense that Jack or anyone else from DOE would reject it on those grounds. It's kind of unreasonable to say never. Sooner or later, if you think the city of Detroit wanted to do what they did, I'm sure they were saying never, 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 and it had to happen, and it did. So not spreading doom and gloom, there's just some realism in there. There's a lot of great points to this. As long as we, in fact, when we say, like other sites, having funded their pensions 100%, I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if it's that important to know. All I know is ours is subpar at this point. And let me just make sure I was taking lots of notes. You guys were making great points. And this to me, just from a philosophical standpoint, basically the way DOE runs the site by using its contractors, you run your contractors because they should be the resident experts of what they do. Private sector, we run a business as an ongoing concern. We have to carry that. So if we're working for the government doesn't give me X number of dollars for M2's pension or my 401k contributions. It's a flat rate for the service provided, and it's that company's responsibility to fund such pensions and benefits to attract and retain the quality employees that they have. So this is where, I hate to say it, the government meddling has helped cause the problem, because it turns into a never-ending revenue stream that, hey, if they screwed up in years past, if my company screwed up in years past, I would be making that at-will decision, do I want to continue working for this company? And here it's almost, you don't have a right to fail. So you are going to get some of that from the public, because some of them are in the same boat I'm in. My investments are my own. So if I fail, I have no one's going to come and say, oh, sorry, Dan, we didn't fund your pension enough, so here's a couple extra $100,000 for you. It just doesn't work that way.
If I might make a comment, I've been through a couple of company collapses and got a chance to get a buyout, not what I wanted, but what they decided. I understand, and I understand the public pushback, but this is a very unusual situation where contractor, SRS, signs up to do certain facility operations and pension operations for the department. The department guarantees them no money every year. They say, we'll depend on what Congress gives us. So the pension is on the hook to the pensioners, right? But they can't guarantee what that money's going to look like and how it's going to come down to them. So they're in this, the contractors are private companies, right? They're here doing a job, and they're making their own pension, they're making the pension payments, and they just include it in the bill to DOE. That's kind of what we're looking at. Right. So the pensioners, that would be me and some other folks, right, look to the company to make us whole. They got to look to the DOE. I don't think anybody views it as a never-ending stream, but the pension has to meet that ERISA standard minimum. And the thing is that the minimum payment to keep it whole, it's not 100%, it's at 80%, to meet the law is getting so high that we have to have a whole different way we look at this. And I understand your concerns, Dan, but it's really weird.
With this plan, all of the financial risk is on the company. None of it is on the employee.
Right.
With a 401k type with a defined contribution, it's all on the employee.
Right.
So.
And I was just going to add, there has to be a catch-up here because, you know, actuarially speaking, I mean, the big issue since the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 has been extremely low interest rates. You know, pension plans, defined benefit pension plans historically are obligated to invest in bonds, not in the stock market. So the stock market's been very good, but the bond market is, well, there's been capital gain opportunities with bonds. There has not been just a nice rate of return. And, you know, 10-year treasuries typically would yield 5 to 6%, and they, you know, what's a 10-year? 4.43 over the last 28 years. Right. So, but since 4.43. Right.
But it's like
But since 2000, I mean, just in June of 2016, the 10-year treasury was 1.33%. You see, so the pension plans are in, defined benefit pension plans across the board are in trouble because they can't get a good rate of return. And you mentioned that earlier, Tom. So I just want to make that comment.
People are living longer.
So, Mary?
No, you were waiting.
Earl? Your turn.
Earl Shepherd Cab. Gil, you did a marvelous job with this recommendation. That's the first thing I need to say. And thank you, Jack, to your crew who provided this information. How many people will be affected by these numbers? Do we have an accurate account?
It's over 10,000 or something.
So there is an accurate account that we can provide to you. I was going to stand up and just for everybody's information, the defined pension plan that we're talking about was closed, I believe, in 2008. Is that right, Tom? So any employee that came to the site after 2008 is under a 401k. So it's a defined contribution plan. So this is for longtime workers hired before 2008. I believe, and this is approximate numbers, there are between 8,000 and 9,000 current retirees as part of this plan, and there are about 4,000 employees at the site who are in this plan that have not yet retired. So I think there's around, if you look at the total with retirees and who could retire, it's something around 13,000 employees. And as I've been told, that is the largest amount of retirees under one plan in the entire department.
Okay, my second question, can DOE provide the cab maybe twice a year on an in-depth, not really, dollar to dollar, but on an in-depth amount per employee, a drill down just like how we have now, at least twice a year to keep this thing alive, to make sure that this doesn't fall again.
Sure. So each January, the actuary provides their required report, an annual report of the state of the pension plan, and it provides all this information: who's in it, liabilities, what the interest rate they're assuming, so forth. There's a very detailed plan. I believe we get some informal updates on that, maybe every 3 months, but the actual formal plan is every January. So certainly we can provide that after January every year, and then we get a less formal report throughout the year.
Can that be shared?
I think so.
And when you provide the next update, can you give us as close to actual and factual, and can you give us a flat rate? Let's just say you were saying that they did the minimal. Can you give us like a flat rate and say this is what it would be if it was at 85 or 90%, or just kind of different increments, just to kind of. Okay. I don't know, Gil, if you want to add that to the list.
Yeah.
Will it really matter?
I was just having Dan and I were doing something we're not supposed to do, and I have a sidebar, and I initiated.
Hey, you
it.
were talking to me.
Yeah, I initiated.
Just for the record.
I took. Hey, I took.
Nodded.
I feel that, and I want to hear what Mary has to say, but I feel that we're maybe heading toward away from the recommendation and going toward the group if DOE is comfortable with that. So, I'm sorry. So that's something to put on there.
Mary Weber Cab, I'll make this brief because Dan really covered a couple of my points. As far as the way the recommendations are set up, number one and number two, are they going to be rejected outright? Because nobody can agree to that. And while the DOE doesn't ever want to cut the benefits, they may be in a position where they may have no alternative. So I think that 1 and 2 you could put in the body of the recommendation, but if you're asking for DOE to agree to 1 and 2, they won't. So what's the point in even mentioning them? And I think it would be a more meaningful recommendation, and I don't think we're in a position to do this right now, is if we were provided with what some options are being considered, and we could weigh in on what our feelings are as to options to fix the problem, that would be a meaningful recommendation. But to just say, never cut the pensions, there's no point in saying that.
To give you the reference point on why I put that in there, it's kind of like when we say as a cab, we never want spent fuel coming to the site. We never want that. It's just the same mentality. That's why I put it in there. I wanted the cab to make a statement, kind of like when we do when we say we never want fuel coming here. That was the point. As far as DOE coming and saying, here's a couple plans, we may be sitting here till the end of time. I mean, I know Jack's got the best of intentions and all those, but I think as a cab, we need to be able to move forward with something without just waiting for them. Now, I love the idea of what Tom's saying, and that's, as the more I listen and the more I hear comment, I think that's the way we're moving. So, but those are my thoughts. Oh, I'm sorry, I took your job.
Well, it would kind of, if the work group would get Mary where I think she wants to go, which is we could explore the options, and then we could select the one that seemed the best match. So.
Joyce Underwood Cab. Okay, so I like where you're coming from with your never. And this gentleman, whose first name is Jack, I don't remember his last name, I'm sorry. He said that this is applying to people. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm new, I'm working on it.
Great, Jack Gray.
Okay, Mr. Gray. He said that this applies.
Sorry, Joyce, go ahead.
I'm trying, okay?
Just ignore him. Work with it.
This applies only to people who were hired before 2008, correct? So, according to this graph, there is like a rate of diminishment of what's going to pay out, right? So, would it be better to word it like instead of never until, because these people ultimately, we all die, they're going to die off, and then it will be a moot point.
We're talking about a lot of people in Aiken County. Come on.
Well, I mean, this is the way of the world. It will ultimately happen, right? And then it will no longer be. So never means until in perpetuity forever. But if you put a limit on it, like verbiage-wise, until, I don't know how you would word it, like until it expires.
Yeah, in talking with Tom, and he's a great resource with his the SRS Retirees Association. We're talking about some people.
I'm getting offended.
I mean, it's easy to, it's one thing, it's one thing to get caught up in numbers and look at declines. We're talking about some people who get $1,300 a month. That's what they're getting their pension. They're getting $1,300. Let's make it real. So there's somebody out there that gets $1,300 a month off their pension, and let's say that the pension, this isn't going to happen, but the pension gets cut by 10%. So now you're not making $1,300. What are you making?
You're asking
$11,700. And that $130 is a huge deal to that retiree who's 85 years old. And this pension, we're sitting here talking about numbers, and it's important, and the conversation we're having is important. But the reality is, I want to put that spotlight on that person that is it going to be air conditioning this month, or is it going to be medicine for my wife?
Oh no, I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with you.
I know you don't.
To satisfy the never issue,
It's shock. Come on. Sometimes when we write recommendations, we know DOE is going to say no. I know they were going to come back with what Mary said. I mean, they're going to be, we reject this. We can't say never. We can't. They can't. I mean, you can answer it for them. But because I'm thinking of that guy, and it's that guy who's 85 years old and gets $1,300 a month. I'm just thinking of him. That's the reason I wrote it.
I feel you.
Yeah, and that's the reason I wrote it that way. And then I also think about the mission at the site and the cleanup, and are we going to be here until 2047, 2065? Are we going to be here to 2100? I mean, it's important. Both are extremely important. And so that's the reason I put it. Did I know that if this cab would have accepted it and moved forward, summarily, we reject number one, we reject number two, it's gonna come out. I mean, that they have to answer it that way. I knew it when I wrote it that way. So just to let y'all know where I was coming from.
Dan?
Just 2 quick questions. So are there employees now who are like hired in December 2007 that will continue to accrue a pension under this plan? I'm assuming that's true, right, from what you said?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And would it be possible to share a current pension plan statement showing what the funding levels are and the project?
You can get that's public information.
I'll give you a copy.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's public information. Yeah.
Well, that's better than Googling.
Yeah.
It's Form
Yeah.
5500. So, Bob, what do I need to do to set up an ad hoc committee or ask for an ad hoc committee?
Well,
In lieu of the recommendation.
we're referencing the standard operating procedures right at the moment here.
I think Nina.
The
I thought it was the chairman. I thought it was the chairman.
Oh, it's the chairman that does it? Okay, I apologize, Bob. I put you on the spot. Nina, what do we need to do to set up an ad hoc committee in lieu of this recommendation?
Coach Harold is here.
Coach.
I think what we would do, it would just be, it would have to go to the executive committee, wouldn't it? And what the executive committee votes.
I think David's looking it up.
Yeah, I
See if
think,
you have any wording in the
I
SIP.
think it says that the ad hoc committee can come as needed. If I'm remembering the wording correctly.
He's got it.
Does it say as needed?
Yeah, section 6.3 talks about other committees and task forces. It says, the board may establish ad hoc committees or task forces as it deems necessary. Then it goes on to talk about the structure of such committees.
So James, how would we do that?
I mean, I don't know if the committee.
Well, the committee can't do it, the board
Yeah,
has to.
that's right. That's
You'd have to
what I
have
heard.
the board to do it. And let's be honest, I mean, logistically, I could put a bunch of people in a room within a week, maybe 2 weeks, but I think DOE needs a little bit of time to gather some information together and be able to. So, if the board needs to request it, then let's take it at the September meeting. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're wanting to do. Make a motion to create an ad hoc committee. We'll figure out everybody who needs to be on it. In the meantime, everybody here has put a lot of thought into it. Maybe come up with a list of questions of things that you'd want to know. What do you want to hear at this ad hoc committee? That way, DOE can already start working on the information and pulling that stuff together.
Is it as I hear you, and just for clarification, is an ad hoc committee a one-time meeting or is it an ongoing process?
It would be an ongoing process as needed. I
So
think that you would set a defined output. Again, if I'm recalling the SOPs, but you would set a defined output, and I think that defined output in this case is going to be the draft. You know, a version
the draft
of this-
recommendation.
Yeah, a version of this draft recommendation that you'll then talk about in committee. And if it takes a couple of meetings, then
Yeah.
go ahead, David.
There's a paragraph that might be applicable here where it says, ad hoc committees and task forces shall be established by the board for the purpose of investigating special topics. Guidelines, membership, and reporting requirements of the ad hoc committees and task forces shall be determined by the board and approved by the DDFO.
So Pam,
looks
do
like-
you have a problem with ad hoc committee? I mean, it's pretty important to get her, you know.
No, if it's approved in your charter, then you have every right to do it.
It's
I
not
agree with
in
James,
writing?
though, it needs to have a specific scope, so they know when they're done, when they've completed their, tasking.
David, can you read that again? Like, does that need to be in writing where we have
Yeah.
to?
Yes,
says-
I was about to recommend
It'd be like a
that.
It
recommendation.
says an ad hoc
for the
committee and
ad hoc.
task forces shall be established by the board for the purpose of investigating special topics. Guidelines, membership, and reporting requirements
Mhm.
of the ad hoc committees and task forces shall be determined by the board.
So I could write something up for you, but I think it would be more meaningful if a board member were to write up what it is that you're expecting out of this, and that's what you can then present to the rest of the cab in September. So perhaps if somebody would like to volunteer to do that.
I'll write it.
We can send you email
But
input.
I mean,
Yes.
I was going to ask for your help, Tom. Maybe we can meet offline.
Okay.
Anybody else would want to meet, or we can do it.
Wouldn't the crux of it just be the committee would be taking the shell of recommendation and refining it to make a
Right. I don't think it would be a particularly difficult thing to write. I think it'd be more meaningful if it came from a member.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll get in touch.
Okay.
And we'll work together.
Okay.
And we'll have it. Is now SOP. Thank you so much for being on top of that stuff.
You're welcome.
That doesn't have to go through committee. I mean, does it have to be sponsored by the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee?
I can just suggest, we could, at our next full board meeting, as part of your committee report, you could say that we discussed this draft recommendation, and the committee came to a consensus that it would be advisable for the board to establish an ad hoc committee on this particular topic and further massage the recommendation.
Bob Doerr, David, thank you for those comments. That's exactly my thoughts as well. We can, if you're making a motion, if that's the course of action that this committee would like to recommend to the board, is there anyone who wants to second that? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Are there any further comment in regard to that motion? Okay, can we have a vote of the committee in regards to the motion? All those in favor? Okay. I was going to suggest, Gil, because you're the original recommendation manager, you are going to get some input from Tom, but we'll put that on the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee agenda for the full board in September, and you can present to the full board what you'd like to, why you're recommending this work group.
That'll be short and sweet. It won't be anywhere near what we had here.
But I think you'll have some things to read into the record there.
Absolutely.
In regards to the scope and why we need this work group and what we want to hear from DOE and that kind of thing.
Gil, and I think, and I know it's not specified in the SOP, but maybe when you're making that point, it's just letting the board know that it is open to the whole board, since it's going to be an ad hoc committee, that you don't have to be a member of this board if you want to participate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Will absences count?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Inside joke on the Administrative Outreach Committee.
We will be discussing those three, because I cannot.
Bob Doerr, can members of the public be involved with this committee?
The way he read it.
Yes, they can. If you read the SOP, non-members of the board can be on committees.
So as you and Tom are working this out, perhaps think about some other folks that would be beneficial to have that you might want to invite to participate. They might have some feedback. I know that you're already thinking of at least 2 or 3 folks.
Gil, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but do you know the board of directors that handles the pension, is that appointed through the federal government, or is that like a state?
I would assume
It's actually, it's a
Are you on
separate,
board?
no, it's a separate group, and the board is appointed by a group of the current contractors that support the pension. So SR, SRS, I don't think the security forces are part of that pension. So what they do is their board elects people to be on this pension board.
So there are local people.
But
Not necessarily local.
I think
They might be corporate presidents or vice
Are you
presidents.
asking about who serves on the board, or are you asking about who manages the fund? I mean, manages the money? Because the board hires a company to do it. I mean, there is an actual company that manages the pension.
I was thinking there was. I was just thinking if you were going to start inviting other people to it, maybe making the invitation to someone from the board, since I'm guessing they would have some pretty good feedback I don't know if that's opening too much, but it might just be something to think about.
There may be a conflict of interest with that.
If that management firm is incumbent since 1989, could we recommend getting rid of them?
I don't think they've been there since 1989. I did look at it that way. I believe it's a firm out of Chicago that manages it. I could be wrong.
The plan name is Savannah River Nuclear Solutions LLC Multiple Employer Pension Plan.
Do you have? No, you don't have the printout. Okay, but yeah, it's actually it's Form 5500. It's public information. I think it tells you at the last page who the actual concurrent. There you go. Jack knows.
So we might want to invite the actuary, the Buck consultants who produce all the reports. I don't know if that's possible, but we could invite them to come in, talk about what the actuary numbers are, what their basis, what their return on investment calculations are, because they're the one that produce all these numbers that are. And I'm going to give Dan right at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, Bob Doerr-Cab, I was envisioning that when this committee presents to the full board an opportunity to set up this ad hoc committee, that we would be inviting, since it can be part of people from the public, can be CAB members, it could be the actuary company representatives. There would be like an open invitation to accept. In other words, you invite people to serve in the committee, and then, some leadership would have to be established, but that could be handled maybe, Nina, through the chair appointing a leader of that committee, or I'm not sure what the operating procedures call for on that.
Just write that up as part of the plan.
Yeah, but that there's an invitation. You certainly don't need 50 people on the committee. Right.
That would be fun.
But I rather than saying, well, we're going to pick who's on the committee, I don't know if you can really do it that way.
So if you invite members from the board to volunteer, and then we might invite specific experts as a group and say, we really want somebody from Buck Consultants, or we want somebody from SRS, John Greenquist, to come and explain how he interacts with the board and what does the board do. John's the guy that has to administer the pension to all the pensioners, so he's the guy right in the middle. And he actually knows all the details going up and down.
You'd be a perfect person.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you delineate between who you're actually inviting to take part and who you're just wanting information from.
Okay.
So.
Bob Doerr-Cab, just one final question then, just on the logistics of the committee. Would this committee meet as part of the agenda for a full board meeting, or would it be a special committee meeting as part of the committee meeting agendas? Or James Tanner, do you have a?
I would say that maybe the cleanest way might just to have them report out to the board.
To the full board?
Yeah, report out to the full board.
Yeah.
And you're going to recommend that the board do this in September. You're going to establish something. You might get some work done. I think November might be a little ambitious for a product.
Really ambitious.
So I think you're looking closer to maybe January or March for when you're going to have a real product out of this. So
I think that's ambitious.
You think that's ambitious?
You're talking about, let's take a step back. It's going to get, assuming everything goes, the CAB approves it.
Mm-hmm.
That puts us in mid-September. Then we have committee meetings, and then basically come back. It's going to take probably 4 weeks to 6 weeks to get the membership of that committee rock solid.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be in November, so the CAB's going to find out who's on the committee in November, and then we're coming around to February at the very earliest, and you're going into December, and December is a dead month. So I think you're looking at springtime next year at the earliest that you're going to have a finding if the full board approves it in September.
That might be fair. I think, though, that it might be in your best interest when you draw up some of this that you put in some sort of deadlines and due dates for when you're expecting a report out.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to get into a situation where you're meeting in an ad hoc committee repeatedly ad nauseum and you're not coming up with anything. I think you feel really passionate about this. I think if we got around to next September and you still don't have a draft, I don't think you'd like that.
I think it's gonna take 6 to 9 months though.
Yeah, well, whatever that period is, we should set a specific deadline for expiration of the committee. And if the board wants to extend that at the time, that's fine.
Yeah, I got you. That's a good point.
I just want to go back to my question of logistically, when would this committee meet though? When would once you have it formed, I mean, is it gonna be listed as another committee meeting, say in
Yeah, it would be a separate meeting else. You wouldn't do it in conjunction with, S&LM or anything like that.
Right.
This would
Right.
be its own independent standalone. We'd have to develop a schedule.
Right.
It'd have to be a public meeting, which is noticed and everything.
It would be like another committee meeting.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
just a temporary committee, really, and
Agreed.
rather than a standing committee like ours is.
Agree.
And you can set a target. When you develop the plan, do you want to meet once a month? Do you want to meet every other month? When is it that you want to put this together? And we'll run it past DOE and the DDFOs so that they can sign off on what you want to do and officially establish it.
It's gonna take a lot of logistics to bring everybody together.
Well, Bob Doerr, I'm just thinking out loud here that if we, assuming the full board approves this ad hoc committee in September, why couldn't a special committee meeting be set up in the October timeframe just to start airing the issues, inviting people? I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. You might not get a lot accomplished, but
Yeah, the first meeting could just be board members who wanted to volunteer.
exactly.
And then everybody could decide who else they wanted to invite.
Right.
So
So
that's
there
a
would
good
be
idea.
progress being made right out of the box if you targeted October of 2017, and then you could use December as another time frame. If you just follow the committee, when the committees meet bi-monthly, so December, October, December.
I was thinking along the line with the actuaries and trying to get people, on the phone and stuff. But yeah, we can definitely try to push it.
Okay.
We'll get people there.
Yeah, I think if you have dates established,
That's
then
what I like
then the resource people that you need could be made available. Jack's got a suggestion.
No, I just would say, whatever your schedule is, we can meet it. You're asking the same kind of questions that we have asked the actuary. So they have a good idea of what the answer is. And what you're looking at is an overview of the issue, what's in the plan, what drives the cost of the plan. It's kind of start out with an overview. And then they have also considered some options for reducing the cost. And so all that information is available.
Cool.
Bob, so I guess this point, it would just be Gil writing up his plan, with everyone's input, sending that over to James so James can run it by, presenting it together in September at the full board. And maybe over the next couple of days, you can look at a day in October and just offer that as the first meeting where you can plan and strategize. So maybe looking at a date in October that would work for everyone, that the room is available, and just make that a planning startup meeting.
That's good.
Thank you for that suggestion, Nina. Okay. Is there a need for any more discussion in regards to this draft recommendation? No, but I think we have a plan to do in lieu of the recommendation. Now we're going to submit a request to the board for a ad hoc committee. We did vote on that. There was a motion made by David and was seconded. And it was,
By you.
yep.
I remember we voted.
Okay. Let's see. Next on our agenda, was there any feedback or comments that this committee or the public would like to make in regards to the presentation regarding the community reuse organization? Okay. Also, we received the full board received a presentation regarding recruitment and retention at SRS. And would anybody here like to make any comment in regards to that presentation?
How's it affect the pension? I'm joking.
we're done with those comments. At this point, what we normally do is we allow for public comment in this committee meeting. So would anyone from the public like to come up and make any points?
Joe Ortaldo, Public. I'm here in full disclosure. I'm a member of the Heritage Foundation's board, and I'd like to thank this committee and the full cab for that recommendation you approved at the last meeting. We appreciate that. We had that at the board meeting today, and the entire board thanks you. Secondly, on the pension issue, and again, full disclosure, I'm on the board of Retiree Association, and I'd like to thank you guys for considering this. It's a very complicated situation. As you get into it, you're going to find it's more complicated than you think it is. But I mean, it does impact a large number of people in the community. There's about 10,000 retirees, maybe a few more. Not retirees, but people who are in the plan, retired and working and eligible for the plan. And 3/4 of them are thereabouts live in Aiken County, Richmond County, or Columbia County. So I mean, this is an issue that's very important to a lot of people that you all represent. And again, I thank you for considering it, and whatever this path forward is, it'll be. But getting into it and understanding it, I'm sure something will come up that'll, at least at a minimum, make you aware of what the situation is, and then you'll be in a better position to make some recommendations as to how we move forward. Thanks.
Okay, would anyone else from the public like to make any comments? Any of our online attendees, any comments? Cab members, no further comments? David?
Dave Vovakes, Cab. I saw or heard today that Centera is on strike, and I was wondering if that is having any effect on operations at the site.
You're correct. The guard union, I think, which represents about 340 guards, went on strike this morning. We had a contingency plan in place. We actually got some resources from other sites and some of our own site resources. So we were able to do all the functions needed for the guard force. The major impact was that we closed 4 of the 8 barricades on site. So that meant we were funneling more people through fewer gates, and so we did have an issue with traffic this morning. Other than that, I'm not aware of any issues.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob Doerr, Cab again. Are there any other comments that anyone would like to make? Public comments? Okay. If there are no further comments, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.